Hi, my name is Andrea Miller. I'm the host of Open Relationships, Transforming Together. Ooh, I have an amazing show for you today. My guest, Vienna Pharaon, is going to tell you how, if you have boundary problems, how to fix them, and let's face it, almost all of us do, and how to keep from repeating those same old hurtful patterns in your relationships that break your heart and make you frustrated every freaking time, whether it's with your spouse, your kids, friends, coworkers, parents, you name it. These relationship patterns can be changed, and Vienna will show you how. So let me introduce my guest, Vienna Pharaon. Oh my gosh, I am so delighted to welcome Vienna Pharaon. Vienna is a licensed marriage and family therapist, one of New York City's most sought-after relationship therapists, and is the founder and owner of the group practice Mindful Marriage and Family Therapy. Vienna is the host of the podcast This Keeps Happening, the author of the beautiful best-selling book, The Origins of You, How Breaking Family Patterns Can Liberate the Way We Live and Love, and is a social media superstar with nearly 1 million engaged followers. Welcome, Vienna.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so much to talk about. Let's just kick off. I mean, what's key to your book is identifying and breaking patterns. Why do we keep making the same mistakes in patterns when they are so to our detriment, but we keep doing the same thing? Why is that, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, it's not because we like torture, right? It's like I have so many people who are like, I am a smart person. I know better. I don't want to keep doing this, and yet I find myself there, right? That's one of the complaints that you hear so often, and it's because we can't solve emotional irresolution and pain with sort of like rational, logical, practical thinking. And a lot of times we try to look at something that's playing out in our lives and just say, okay, I'm going to just do this differently. But when that doesn't work, right, it's like we sort of feel knocked off a bit, right? Where it's like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? I mean better. I want to do better. But when, the rubber meets the road, for whatever reason, I can't actually make the changes that I want to make. And so when we can't make these changes in our present day lives as adults, I am of the mind that it's because there is pain from our past that hasn't been processed, right? That hasn't actually been acknowledged, that hasn't been addressed in the way that it needs to be addressed. Because when we think about our past, a lot of times we just sort of white knuckle our way through to the other side. We survive our way through whatever it is that has happened. And we don't actually slow down and spend time to witness our pain and grieve our pain and actually acknowledge what it is that happened. We do a really good job of just kind of riding over it and minimizing it or distorting it in some way. And so we don't actually know how to be with our
Hoping it'll
pain
go away.
properly. Hoping that it'll go away, or even seeing it sometimes as a skill set or an asset in our lives. Right? A lot of times people will be like, well, I wouldn't be who I am today without the thing that happened, right? And you're like, that is true, right? It is a part of your story, but if we don't acknowledge it properly or do some of the work that we need to do around it, then it's still going to run your life in certain ways. And that's, when people who have a pattern that keeps playing out, whether it's, continuing to pursue emotionally unavailable folks, whether it's having the same conflict with a partner over and over again and showing up in this conflictual way that you really hate, that you don't like, that you're like, I promise I'm never going to do that again. Whether it's saying that you're going to set a boundary 50,000 times, but when it comes time to set it, you drop the ball each time, right? Whatever the scenario might be, right? When we can't make that change, there's an arrow that is pointing back to something prior to that moment in time that is needing our attention.
And I love how you talk in your book about, you refer to Brene Brown's famous TED Talk, and, she was going to therapy and she's like, but like all that, childhood and family shit is off,
Yeah.
cut
it out, cut it out.
Limits. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. Right. Like there's really, it feels like almost no choice but to go back, which is the whole point of your book, The Origins of You. So you talk about these 5 origin wounds. Do you mind just giving just a little bit of an overview to kind of ground our discussion?
Yeah. And we have to go back to go forward. And I always tell people, we're not going to get stuck there. Okay. Our goal is not to get trapped in this place, because a lot of times people are a little resistant to the idea of having to go back decades, years ago to explore certain things. And I understand why that can feel really overwhelming, or why somebody is like, I'm coming into therapy to talk about the thing that's playing out in my life right now. Why on earth are we going to rewind 40 years, 20 years, 50 years? I want to talk about the thing that's pressing right now. So I just want to name up front sort of the framework is we're not getting stuck there. We're not getting lost there. Our goal is not to throw people under the bus, hate someone. We're not trying to destroy anything.
It's not about blame, which
It's
I
not
love
about
how you do
blame.
such a beautiful job of not making it about blame. I mean, and looking back to our families of origin and recognizing that what our parents got or caregivers and you talk about, it's not even just about your family of origin. I mean, some of these wounds can occur later in life, but it's that it's everybody kind of has these hardships and heartaches, and so it's almost like we're given the opportunity to learn and grow from each other. But anyway, go ahead, because I do want to kind of come back to some of those themes.
Yeah. So when I sat down to write the book, I'm scribbling down like, what are all of the wounds that people experience in a lifetime, and I had so many listed. And then I was able to really narrow it down to 5 that I thought really did a good job of encompassing the human experience. It's my language. It's a framework for a book. If there's language that works better for someone else, great. Use whatever word works best for you and resonates with you. But the 5 origin wounds that I talk about in the book are the worthiness wound, belonging wound, prioritization wound, trust wound, and safety wound. And I also use the word wounds in the book and really focus on that, as opposed to saying trauma all the time. And one of the things that I've realized over the time as a therapist, because I'm a practicing therapist as well, right? Not just an author, or not just somebody who posts on social media, right? But I work with individuals and families and couples all the time. Is that a lot of times when you use the word trauma, which is a really popular word that we've been using pretty regularly as of late, a lot of times people check themselves out of the conversation, meaning they say, well, I didn't really have trauma, and so I don't have a place here in this conversation. Or they say something like, well, so-and-so, right? A friend, a colleague, a neighbor had it way worse than I did. I call that wound comparison, right? And so again, we check ourselves out of the conversation and don't feel like there's a sense of belonging here for me, right? I don't belong in this conversation. Wounds felt like an invitation to say, hey, we all bump up against something. And certainly there are wounds that can be traumatic, but not everything has to be traumatic for it to be something that is significant to us, for it to be something that sets the framework and the foundation for the way that we relate to ourselves or the people around us or life at large. And that's what I wanted to invite people into, to say, hey, there are going to be experiences because our family systems, the adults in our lives, the people who were meaningful in our lives were imperfect. They got things wrong. They didn't say the right thing all the time. They dropped the ball. They just weren't these perfect people in our lives. And can we start to acknowledge and honor the experience that we had in relation to that? So yeah, these 5 wounds are the wounds that I see play out most in folks. And yeah, that invitation for people to start to identify what origin wounds they rub up against and how those origin wounds really play out in their relationships still today.
Yeah, I love that, because I think you're right. I think the word trauma can feel really off-putting, right? If it's like, oh, if that thing wasn't bad enough, and you do such a beautiful job in the book, inviting people to look at their lives with more compassion and to be a little more open and gentle, and say, whatever it was, that is causing you heartache now, that's for real. And, you provide a really wonderful context to, to understand that. And I've appreciated that. In fact, I was telling one of my colleagues or a couple of my colleagues, I think it was actually yesterday, that I found, and I've done a lot of work myself. And in going through your book, I actually listened to it. I found it, I want to say triggering in a good way, because you talk about how grief, when it comes to healing, how grief is inevitable. And I want to come back to that. But when I think about, for those of us who are on a healing journey, how often we repeat certain patterns, even when we're trying so hard not to. And that's been what I personally have been bumping up against. I have two amazing kids. They're 11 and 14. And I come from a family with a lot of dysfunction, alcoholism, eating disorders, and so forth. And so in reading your book, it made me profoundly sad, and yet it also gave me so much kind of validation for what my healing journey has been like. And I wanted to, A, thank you for that, and B, ask you, it's like I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. When we know better and we've spent time in different forms of therapy, why is it that we keep having to go back and make those same mistakes? And for me, it's like I'm making some of the mistakes that were made in my childhood with my own kids. And that is the worst. That is the worst feeling in the world, to know better, in air quotes, to know better, and then to still make those mistakes. And I know I'm not alone. And that's why I'm kind of putting myself out there to say, a lot of us, not only then do we make those mistakes, then we feel guilty about making those mistakes because we should know better. So what do I do? What do others do? And why is this happening?
Well, the fact that you even have the awareness is such a gift, right? And I don't know what your kids would say, right, if they were sitting here with us, and they might have additional thoughts on it.
Oh, but I keep it real with them. They call me out. I'm accountable, and they get so tired of it. I'm like, I just want to talk through it. And they're like, okay, we've heard it. We forgive you. Like, let's move on, right? Like, I really do try to change that pattern where the repairs are made, ownership is taken, and that has been one of the greatest gifts. I always call my kids my little Buddhas. That's been healing to me, to not feel like I have to sit there with the shame and guilt, but instead say, I'm going to own up to this in the most authentic way that I can. And I know that, I've got a great bond with my kids, but in part, I feel like I have a great bond because there have been these challenges in our relationship. They are not superficial relationships with these kiddos.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times parents enter into the game with the hope, like, I'm never going to do anything that's going to hurt or, harm my children. And, it's not to necessarily lower that bar, because obviously we want to be very mindful and thoughtful as parents. And, we want to do as little hurt and harm as we can. And also the reality of it is that we are imperfect, flawed individuals who are going to be part of this dance with our kiddos. And there's going to be stuff that plays out there. And when, you're right, that when we're repeating certain things that we experienced as children ourselves, and you're like, oh, like this one feels gut wrenching because I know it. I've lived it before. I've been in their shoes, and here it is playing out again. And so easy, like you said, for that shame and guilt and embarrassment to enter in. But the other thing that you're talking about is your ability to repair. And it's one of the greatest gifts that we can offer as parents. And your ability to take accountability, to take ownership, to acknowledge something, to say that you're sorry when it's appropriate for you to say that you're sorry. And it's in that space that you're actually doing things differently. A lot of times people will say, it's like, if I re-enter into something that I know that I shouldn't be doing, that's a failure. No, it's not. It actually isn't. I would take a different perspective on that. And what I would say is that our ability to exit sooner, right, our ability to do something different in that space is actually where so much of the healing is. You might want to sit here and say, I wish I had the magic wand and that I would never, ever, ever do the thing that I know that I ought not do. And I would take that magic wand and, bop someone on the head with it and say, well, that's probably not going to happen in a lifetime. But can we be in this space where, shoot, I entered into this space that I wish that I hadn't entered into. I made a comment about food that I wish that
Or
I
I
hadn't made a comment
overreacted.
about. Yes, right? Like whatever, I overreacted. I brought something up that I wish that I hadn't brought up, whatever it is. But your ability to race to repair, your ability to exit that space instead of just crossing your arms or being just unaware of it, like maybe someone in a previous generation might have been, right? That is actually where the growth and the expansion and the healing is. And I would really encourage people to offer themselves that perspective. This is such a great example that you're giving about your own life. I remember a client of mine, she was so upset with herself. She had realized that a relationship wasn't right for her. And then she had waited about 6 weeks before putting an end to it. And I remember in the session, she's like, oh, what's wrong with me? I can't believe that I waited this long to exit. And I had a little smile. And I had a little smile on my face. And she said, what? What are you smiling about? It's like, well, I just want to remind you that it took you 10 years to exit your previous marriage. And she sat there for a moment. And she knew, obviously, what I was pointing out and getting at. We have a lovely relationship where we can use a little bit of humor in it, right? And so I just sat there smiling at her and like, you're really giving yourself a hard time over 6 weeks, huh? And the point, of course, was not, oh, I didn't exit the moment that my gut, my intuition knew that this thing was wrong or that this thing was off. It was, oh my goodness, you exited a dynamic that was off, misaligned for you so much faster than you have ever exited before. That is a victory. That is a win. But where we decide to focus our attention, right? Because it's just so easy to go down the rabbit hole of shame and guilt and, I should be better. I know better, right? It's like, can we actually change out that lens and look for the ways in which we are doing this so beautifully, so differently than we've ever done it before?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as you were speaking, that just to change that paradigm or that framework where it's almost like it's like we always want to be happy and at peace and feeling great, and sure, why not, right? Because it feels better, but it's almost like we need an entire reframing that says, I mean, I feel like the Buddhists do it really well. Life is suffering, right? And so if it's like, oh, I should expect suffering, and then when I do better, or, I'm feeling content or happy, joyful, and peaceful, then that's an upside versus expecting a baseline. And I'm not fatalistic at all. If anything, I believe that we can have way more peace, love, and joy. But, the point that we're discussing here is I feel like for myself, it's like, oh my gosh, things are amazing. And then I screw up, or then something happens and then I overreact. And then, then it's like, that distress of, and feeling like, well, this isn't supposed to happen, but that's supposed to, like, that feels like what we need to eradicate. It's like, well, wait, but we're here to grow and connect. So these unbidden, but nevertheless important experiences are critical for connection and growth. Right. But we don't want them. I mean, we avoid them like anything. And that it just feels like it's such an opportunity to say, wait, we've got it wrong as human beings. You know what I mean?
Totally. And listen, to be clear, neither one of us is saying like, let's have as many ruptures as we possibly can.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think, to your point, the idea is there can't actually be much growth or healing or expansion or evolution, whatever words you want to use, if there isn't some type of rupture. And to think about when I misstep with my kids, in your example, right, what is the opportunity that is getting presented that is actually so beautiful, right? As opposed to, okay, if I missed, like, I guess the alternative would be I never say anything wrong. I never overreact. I never do anything that could possibly ever upset them. And I think in that, which we know obviously couldn't even possibly exist, but we never have to meet our edges relationally if that is how we were to exist in the world. And we would never be teaching our children and modeling to our children what it looks like to repair, what it looks like to have accountability and ownership in a relationship, to say that it is actually normal and okay for there to be ruptures in these dynamics, as long as we are coming back together and doing it, hopefully respectfully. And obviously we're human and we have moments where we, lose
Are
it a little
totally
bit,
disrespectful and crazy.
totally, right? Like it happens to all of us, but it's to see what it is that we are demonstrating and teaching and offering. And to me, that is, that's the gift. There's something so beautiful there.
Totally. And even in addition to, for us as parents, but for us as spouses and siblings and children of parents and so forth, I'm reminded, I forget how she phrased it exactly, but God bless Sue Johnson, who we all loved and learned so much from, this idea that relationships are here to grow each other.
Yeah.
And it's like we want to avoid those feelings of being embarrassed and the rupture and the disconnection. And yet that's the key to intimacy. In fact, I was just, with my parents recently, and my mom's not doing well. And, we've had quite a bit of heartache in our family. And my dad and our relationship has just become so beautiful and so open. And so I feel like I can take risks and talking to him about things in a way that I felt like I couldn't in the past. And it's really been, in part just by doing my own work, right? And the forgiveness and having more compassion for myself and
That's
them.
right.
And it's beautiful, right? And it's so healing. And I know it means so much to him too, but it's like I'm only able to do that because I've been willing to grieve the pain, to face the flames. All those things, and it's worth it. Right? Because it's like, oh man, this feeling of showing up whole in our relationship and knowing that I have so much to offer him in a time in his life when he's a little more fragile, given that he's my mom's caretaker. But man, it's like a little,
huge,
not gonna lie, a little bruising to get there,
Yeah. I'll also offer that I think part of what we try to avoid by not getting it wrong is actually us not wanting to sit in our own shame. And I think that if we had a different relationship with our sense of worth or value around shame and embarrassment and guilt, then it changes our ability to mess up and screw up and say the wrong thing sometimes and actually just live in this human experience. And what I mean by that is, I think most of the time we enter into this space where we're trying to be self-protective as opposed to being relationally protective. So whether that is us with our children, whether that is us with a partner, whether that's us with a friend, a colleague, whomever, right? We often will enter into this space where we become self-protective. So I have to prove my point. I have to show you that I'm right. Here's how you are wrong. Here's how you participated in this thing that we just played out.
Safe. Right? It can be either way, but both of or all of the above prevents connection. And back to the Sue Johnson thing, it prevents the chance to grow and connect, right? So it's
Absolutely.
like, okay, you can protect, but then you pay a price, right?
When we
and that's the whole point.
it lets us know that we're having to navigate something around shame, guilt, and embarrassment, and that's often tied to the way that we see ourselves, right? It's like, I'm not a good person. I did this. I'm so embarrassed about it. Like, I can't believe I did this thing, right? And I often say to people, when we can hold ourselves in high enough regard, meaning that when I make the mistake, when I raise my voice, when I take a low blow, when I do any of those things, I can still see myself as a worthy, valuable human being who deserves connection, who deserves love, who deserves intimacy, right? That like, just because I did that thing does not mean that those things then become eradicated.
Well, yeah, and I would add to that. I mean, in my experience, and I forget the details, but I mean, I just was super reactive recently, and I called my family together. I mean, this took a lot of chutzpah for me. I called everybody together, and and I was particularly tough on one of my kids, and I was like, "Hey, I want you all to hear how embarrassed I am by my behavior," and and I went on to make the apology and make the repair and say, and here are the things that I'm doing to try so hard that this doesn't happen again. And, they were like, whoa, and oh my gosh, it was so humbling. But I feel like this is where the power is. It was so humbling. And yet it was also so freeing and empowering for me, exactly for the reasons you were saying, because, and my kids could see, and my husband could see that rather than shoving that down or hiding it, that I was willing to say, I'm human and I care enough about myself and you guys to be literally telling you how embarrassed I was. Right. And it was like, not that I want to keep doing that. Right. I mean, the whole point is to grow beyond it and then to teach my kids. But that I share that really openly because I don't think that's very common. And it really, I felt like, the bond that I have, particularly with that son, has grown all the stronger. Because it was like, I'm accountable to you and I see you. And it's just like, there is something in the act of it that is profoundly healing.
Absolutely. And it also models that I can feel and have the experience of embarrassment and still believe that I am a good enough human, that I am a worthy human, right? Like that to me is where so much of the beauty is. And so again, when we can hold ourselves up in high enough regard as human beings that say, I am worthy, I'm valuable, I'm good enough, I'm all of these things, even when I behave in certain ways. And again, that's not an excuse. I'm not making excuses here. We have to be accountable, but I am still these things, even if I say the wrong thing, even if I lost my shit at you, even if I did the thing, right? Then it allows us to have the types of conversations that you just described. And that's where healing is, as opposed to you doubling down. You doubling
right,
down
which
as a
I've
mom.
done.
Sure. And I've done it too.
Or
100%.
Or choosing disconnection, which, I mean, oh my God, I feel like, at times I've been so hurt and triggered and, going into, what's been unconscious for me that rather than making the repairs or doing the wise thing, it's like I double down by withdrawing. And it's like how to really screw something up for yourself and your kids. And it's so like, I can't think of something that's been more painful for me that was self-inflicted. Like, hello,
Totally.
Self-sabotage. Why do we do that?
Yeah. And let's speak to one of the wounds, because one of the wounds that I think, when I was writing about the worthiness wound, I was like, I'm pretty sure that every human sort of rubs elbows with the worthiness wound at some point in their lives, which was absolutely true for me. And even if it's not the primary wound for every single person, I think there's something in it for many of us. And so you could imagine, based on the things that you and I are talking about right now, if your worthiness, your value as a human being is tied to your ability to be perfect, to perform, to present in a certain way, to please other people, which is where we see it often play out quite a bit. So like anybody who's a perfectionist, anybody who's a people pleaser, or like this is, we're talking to you right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
All those things.
Mm-hmm. So the moment that you misstep, the moment that you're imperfect, the moment that you do something that doesn't, set you up in this nice light, right, is the moment that you need to self-protect, because automatically what you probably learned as a kiddo is that in order to get love, connection, presence, attention, validation, calm, peace, etc. in your family, in your home, you had to get the straight A's, dress a certain way, score a hat trick on the field, be less this or more of that,
be helpful,
etc.
Right?
Be helpful,
the good girl.
fill
all
in
those
the blank,
things.
whatever the condition was, right? It's like we see conditional love play out with worthiness. And that's, I think what you're describing, what we're talking about here is that, the conditions of our family, the conditions of our relationship don't have a lot of wiggle room in them. When they don't have wiggle room in them, then unless we are perfect or fill in the blank, then we have so much shame, or we believe that love is lost, or we believe our children are going to hate us, or we believe our partner is going to leave us, or. And that's a real recipe for disaster. I remember similarly, but I'll give a partner example as opposed to parent-child example that you're giving. I was at the time dating my now husband, so spoiler alert, we made it through. But we're in a conflict, and I have no clue what the conflict is about, but I do know that I cannot stop proving my point. I am doubling down. I am tripling down. I am just going for it. And bless him, he's sitting there and he's like, I got it, Deanna. I understand. Like he's non-combative. He's not hostile at all. Like he's just right there with me, but I cannot stop. I'm having this out-of-body moment, and I'm like, Vienna, shut up, like don't keep going. You're just like in this spiral. And then finally I'm able to stop it. And boom, oh my gosh, the shame just starts coming in from left field. And I'm like, oh, this is so gross. Like he's not going to want to be with you. He's, this was really unbecoming. Like this relationship might be over. And then I very quickly, and this is my therapist toolkit, right? But I very quickly am able to kind of move out of that space and ask the question about what that behavior was actually trying to protect me from. And we'll pivot here slightly because I think it's important because for all of us to begin to identify some of this, because the parts of ourselves, the behaviors that sometimes we engage in that we're like, ugh, I hate this part of me, or I'm very critical of this part, or maybe somebody else has given us feedback that this part of us is not so great. So I'm sitting with myself and I'm like, okay, what does needing to be right and proving your point serve? What is it protecting you from? And it brought me right back into my family of origin, which was not hard for me to find at that time. And just a little bit of context. I grew up, my parents went through a 9-year divorce process, very high conflict, a lot of gaslighting, manipulation, paranoia. I mean, it was really, really bad.
You talk in your book about
abuse.
how you and your mom had to literally escape. I mean, it was really dramatic.
Yeah.
Listening to you tell that story from when you were very little. Right. And
it was tough. It was tough. And my dad was really, he was a master manipulator with my mom. And it wasn't something that was directed at me, but it was something that I observed frequently. And I remember as a kid really deciding that being right, which my dad could always do because he was masterful with his words, meant safety. And being wrong, which my mom would just stumble over the facts and the details and all the quick movement that he would make, right, was a lack of safety. And so for a long period of time, right, I equated like power, control, safety with being right and proving your point.
Exactly.
And so I remember having this moment with, my now husband, but, partner at the time. And it like the light bulb went off. And the reason I share that again is because I think it's so important for anybody who's listening and thinking about like, what are the things that I am ashamed of? What are the things like the behaviors that I bring forward that I am embarrassed about or hold a lot of guilt about or just judge about myself?
Or maybe not even aware of. Like, 'cause I feel like that kind of righteousness, which is so common, I'm guilty of it. I love that that's an example. It's like, I feel like what's really insidious about that one is I'm not embarrassed because I'm right? And even though it can be really destructive, it's like that righteousness sort of it justifies itself, right? So it becomes, I mean, it's like workaholism and being an overachiever. Like, isn't it a good thing? Like to have that sense of conviction, but then it's like, again, a form of like very insidious self-sabotage. Mm-hmm. But anyways,
yeah,
I think you, your point.
I think you don't experience it as much in the moment, right? Like there's like a little bit of a high that happens when you're proving your point and you're right and that person's wrong and you're pointing it out. But then in the aftermath, that's where it starts to enter and you're like, ugh, right? Like this isn't
if you're self-aware. Yeah.
if you're self-aware, right? But
Yeah.
ultimately, you're still going to experience some type of disconnect. There's going to be a pulling away that often happens there. And yeah, I mean, that's the invitation, right? Is to be gentle with ourselves and be compassionate with ourselves, to know that our behavior makes sense in context. Again, not an excuse for our behavior, but our behavior makes
Right.
sense in context if we can start to understand the layers and the history around that context for us. And that's where our work is, right? In order to then be able to create some changes and do things differently present day.
Yeah. So will you talk a little bit about whether you were able to make repairs with your parents? I mean, just it sounds like having grown up with a lot of chaos, and you talk about then being the really chill girl, and I want to get to boundaries that you talk about because that's so important. But did you ever feel like you needed to go back and just try to like repair with them? And I realize parents versus kid, it's like they should be doing the repair, but in a way it doesn't matter. So whatever happened with them, if anything?
So both of them read my book. And I remember when my mom was reading it, and she read it a little bit before it came out, maybe a couple of weeks before it pubbed. And, she read it in, 2 days or something. And I remember her reading the beginning, and it was a bit of what you had named before, where we were, hiding in this closet. And I remember her holding the book and sort of closed it and just sat there. She's like, oh, gosh, that must have just been so hard. And then she looked at me and she's like, I was just so crazy. And she didn't mean it in a derogatory way,
Oh,
right? I think
right.
she
No, it's like she was like chaotic.
Yeah, she really understood what she was saying in that moment. And I know that word has a lot of it can have a lot of charge to it. But when I describe it, right, like to be part of a relationship where there was so much gaslighting and manipulation and psychological abuse, it truly was crazy making for her. And so that word really was the right word to use. And I just remember like observing and witnessing this moment that she was having. And there was something really validating about it. And then after she had finished the book, we were outside sitting together, and she just said to me, she said, is there anything you need from me to help you heal more? And, I was like, oh, no.
Oh, here's
actually,
my long list of 17 things.
Here's everything. No,
no.
it was like one of these moments, and it was I was taken a
That's
little
so
bit aback
moving.
by it, and
Yeah.
it was very moving, and it was emotional. And I was like, no, I actually don't need anything from you. And maybe what I didn't say at the time was just even that question alone, right, was maybe what I needed. Was sort of the
Yeah.
acknowledgement that you had just read this book. And obviously, the book is not a life story. I do put some of my story in it, but it's not a memoir. It doesn't go into my life in too much depth, but it felt like there was an acknowledgement there that was really this is really beautiful and really quite moving. And there wasn't I didn't need her to do anything or say anything, or we didn't have to have any conversations that I felt like were, still open at that time. But it was just a really nice gift from her to have read that book and not been reactive about it, or like pointing out where I was wrong, or where I recollected that incorrectly. And it was just like, do you need anything from me? And so that felt very special.
Good job, Mama. Yeah, it feels like the validating, like she saw you, right? And honestly, I think it would have been a very different book, or a very different reaction for her. Like you made it safe for her to do that, right? Because you didn't sit there and say, and oh my gosh, judgment against my parents. Like you presented the facts and how those
Right.
facts have impacted you, and what you've gone on to do in your life. But now, okay, so what about your dad? You said he read it too. What was his response?
He read it too, and there was a bit of a different experience there. And I remember, it was interesting because what played out was something that was like what I wrote about in the book, and my dad, when I was a good kid and like agreeable and, doing what he wanted me to do, love, help, support, presence, all those things were always there. He was phenomenal.
But that's the conditional, that's the problem. That's conditional, right? You love me if I'm the good girl.
Yeah. And then when I, pushed on boundaries or was difficult, and when I say difficult, I mean I was a pretty good kid. I wasn't
human,
challenging them.
Right? I mean, if you're being human, and it's like we need to be loved, like all of us need to be loved, not just the good parts. Like that's the whole point.
And so I would get my punishment was the silent treatment, and sometimes it would be days or weeks on end, and it really it solidified, right, that like, okay, you need to be this way in order to have that, and if you do this, then love is taken away from you, presence is taken away from you, that this is how you're punished. The part of the book, right in the beginning, again, it's like I believe that his shame, entered in reading it, and he was upset about it. And I remember, and he gave me the silent treatment for a little bit of time. And when we finally spoke, I remember him saying, he was proving the story wrong. You see where I got it? He was trying to prove the story wrong.
Kind of meta.
And yeah, exactly. And I remember, I remember saying to him, like, Dad, no one thinks badly of you. Like, everybody loves you. Like, no one's like, there's nothing like this is happening. Like,
and by the way, it's not even about you, dude. It's not about you, right? I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah. And I sort of went into this space where it's like, this is a real teaching moment, because it's not actually about what you think is factually correct or incorrect. This is about what my experience as a child was, and to be able to hear that and to listen to that part of it. And that is actually the point of the entire book, is that if we get distracted by, well, that's not true, or here's what your mother did, and you didn't know this detail, and yada, yada, yada. It's like, well, did you know this? And I was like, I did know that. It's like that when we are so focused on those things, what happens is it becomes a distraction away from what the pain actually is. It doesn't matter if I got certain things wrong, or if I didn't know every single detail about my parents' marriage and divorce. In fact, I shouldn't know every single detail and fact about it. I was explaining and describing the impact on me and my takeaways of it, right? How I experienced it. And it was a really nice conversation when we got to have it, because I think he really could hear and understand that it wasn't about the details, and that it wasn't about what was factually right or wrong based on his opinion, but that this was my history, and this was my experience, and that the whole work of this book is to get people to connect to their experience without needing to manage the emotional experience of others, without needing to have the exact facts or the detail. It's like, what's your takeaway and what needs to be acknowledged here?
Well, totally. And it feels like, we're coming full circle here, where your experience, or you're expressing your experience in a way that's not meant to be shameful or blaming, but to explain where you're coming from. And your mom sounds like she did a good job to say, like, basically, wow, I see you, right? And can I help, right? And it's like back to the, sort of the whole point of your book, like, to be able to look within ourselves and acknowledge those truths is such a key. I mean, that's what you talk about: witnessing, grieving, and then pivoting, which maybe we can segue into that. But that whole business of the witnessing, like, we have to witness for ourselves, right? Because otherwise it's sweep it under the rug, and then we wonder why we feel so miserable, right? And we often can't expect somebody else to see it from our perspective because, and you talk about in the book, one woman, I forget her name, was trying to explain to her mom and her mom just couldn't see it, wasn't ready for it. And so if you have a parent where it's safe, where that you feel like you can have that conversation and they'll get it, great. But if you can't, it's like, you don't necessarily need a parent. Like you even talked about how wonderful your husband was. I think there was something with another family member and how he really validated your experience. And you were like, okay, great. I don't need the other person to validate it. You see me, and how healing that is.
Yeah. Listen, in our perfect worlds, the person who put the pain there in the first place is able to acknowledge it and do it wholeheartedly and cleanly. Okay, lovely. But that's not the reality for the majority of people. And thank goodness we don't need the person who put or contributed to the pain in the first place to do this work. I mean, we would be held hostage, right? We would really be trapped here if that were the case. And that's the beauty.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are like, they want that. Like I've heard from a number of people, I need my dad too. I need my mom too. And I want to say, sister, you don't need them to, right? But that, that becomes a sort of reinforced message. I need them to. Like, no, free yourself. You know what I mean? But so talk about that, the witness, grieve, pivot. And do we have to grieve? Can we just skip that part? I feel like I know the answer.
Oh, I'm so sorry to say. Yeah. So I walk people through an origin healing practice in the book. And this is something that is not, you don't just like do step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you are done and right? It's like rinse, wash, repeat, all of the stuff. Right? Like this work is ongoing work.
It's a journey, right?
A point of arrival. It is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to name that we don't move through these parts often very quickly.
Like going to Costco.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like we don't just go there, we get our stuff, we get too much stuff, we go home, we unload it, and we're done.
Yes, this takes a little extra time than that. So we're acknowledging what the wound is in the first place. I'm a really big believer that the witnessing and the grieving, like that's where the gold is. Yeah, that's where the magic is. And when I think about witnessing, so to me, witnessing and grieving is the thing that expands the space. Many people have heard the quote that is attributed to Viktor Frankl about like between stimulus and response, right? There is this pause, there is this space. And to me, grieving and witnessing is actually what allows that space to expand so that we can choose differently. I often say part of healing is the move from survival to choice. So when we grieve and witness, we give ourselves the gift of being able to choose differently, right?
Versus emotionally react and then continue to cue the same crazy pattern.
Exactly, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where it's like when kind of full circle to where we started today. Why do I keep doing the same thing that I know that I shouldn't be doing, right? Is that this work is what allows you, it grants you choice. So, okay, when stuck, grieve more, okay? No, we cannot get through this work without grieving.
Don't tell me that.
I know, but
no, but it's actually good advice. When stuck, grieve more. I'm writing that down.
When stuck, grieve more. Yeah, when stuck, grieve more. So, okay, the witnessing process, it's a little bit of inner child work. When I think about my experience as an only child, I remember when I started to do this work just for myself, and I thought like, what age came to mind? And it was usually like 7, 8, 9-year-old me who was often perched atop the stairs or in the second, in the bedroom, picking up the second line in the house to listen in to the fights and conversations that my parents were having because I was trying to figure out what was true and not true because there was so much gaslighting, manipulation, lying, etc. And the witnessing was me present day, right? Adult me witnessing younger me, right? So a little bit of that inner child work. So it was me closing down my eyes, bringing an image into the picture frame for myself, which was me sitting at the top of those stairs and really witnessing what it was like for 7, 8, 9-year-old me to be in that position as a little girl, listening to highly conflictual fighting between two people I really cared about and loved, and just how heartbreaking it was, right? Like it was a gut-wrenching image. And just getting closer to her, sitting down next to her, if that was okay with her. And I lead people through this in the book too, so that it doesn't, it's not so abstract. But just allowing the self to be witnessed, and slowing down into that. I believe that there's so much beauty in witnessing the self. And I think there is an incredible amount of beauty in having someone else also witness us. So whether that is a partner, a dear friend, a therapist, listen, sometimes I lead retreats, and, sometimes it's like someone you've met 24 hours before, bearing witness to you. But because there is this level of intimacy and connectedness that is present, like it's remarkable what can happen there. And then grieving, right, is the authentic expression of emotion that gets released when we witness. It doesn't look a certain way. You don't have to cry necessarily to be grieving. And maybe you are, maybe there's an anger that comes forward, but it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's just whatever the authentic expression of emotion is when you do that witnessing of the pain, the loss, whatever it is that you're bringing into focus. When we do that enough, right, when we actually spend quality time there, intentional time there, what happens is what I was describing before. The space starts to expand, because we're going to have activations in our adult lives. The things that were hurtful, painful for us as kiddos, where we questioned our worth, where we questioned a sense of belonging, whether we questioned whether we were important to the important people in our lives. Somebody does something that feels slightly deceitful, or our gut, like our intuition gets like a ping, or we don't feel safe or secure in a relationship because something weird is going on. When we get those hits as adults, right, instead of just going into survival mode, what do I need to do to shut this down? Do I become a perfectionist? Do I overfunction? Do I become boundaryless? Do I, try to go into my partner's emails and DMs and see if I can find, what it is that's maybe going on here? Instead of going into that space, when we have a deeper understanding of our origin wounds and we do spend this time doing this, then we're able to choose differently in that moment. So instead of not saying anything because I don't want the relationship to end, I might be more willing to tolerate the risk or the consequence of saying, hey, something feels off to me and I want to talk to you about this, right? And so it starts to move us out of old patterns and behaviors into new ones.
And that's where I feel like that just how we grow in and heal, so much of our wounds have occurred through relationship, and that's where they need to get repaired. So, and you give so many beautiful examples, and, even offering phrases and so forth, but it's like you need that pause, and the Viktor Frankl's quote there, where then, like you say, then you can avoid the emotional reactivity, but instead then you can achieve your pivot. That's where you break the pattern, and you do it enough times where it becomes so much easier and it becomes so much less scary, right? That's the whole point.
It does, right? It's a muscle that we are exercising. And what I will say is that, the first time you do it, it generally does not feel very empowering or like a high five or wow, like mic drop moment. I remember the first time I did a pivot, it was my late 20s, was dating somebody who I thought I was going to be with. Really felt like it was serious, and his ex came back into the picture. And, at the time I was still the people pleaser, flying under the radar, cool girl persona, not affected by anything. I don't have any boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember, having a conversation with a friend, actually somebody I think you've had on the show before, Mark Groves. And, it really struck me how much of the same role I was playing as an adult as I had as a child. And I finally was like, okay, I'm going to call him and tell him that I don't feel respected, because he was trying to decide whether he should be back with her, and they were spending time together, et cetera, et cetera. And, I finally voiced what I needed to voice, and I ended the relationship. I was like, I'm pulling myself out of the equation here. And I, never heard from him again. And this wasn't a hell yeah moment. This was this felt like death. This felt awful, even though I had done the thing.
And it was a death of sorts.
It was.
Right? Not only for the relationship, but in a way, even in that, like how painful it feels to have to do this thing. And it ended in the loss of a relationship rather than them, kind of sweeping you off your feet and saying, "Oh my gosh," like, so there is risk there, but then the risk of not doing it is greater because you would have proceeded in a relationship with somebody, if you will, under false pretenses. Like you would have given
Sure.
up yourself. And
Yeah.
that's the
And
problem.
I had for a really long time. But my point is that most of the time when we are creating change, it doesn't feel good right away. But just because it doesn't feel good doesn't mean that you're on the wrong path. And that I really want to nail that home for people, because I think sometimes we have this idea that growth and like choosing the quote unquote right thing is going to feel really good. Like it doesn't. Like when we're meeting a moment of expansion in our lives, and maybe this is on my radar because I'm about to give birth here in a few weeks, but that it is then met with contraction. And if you could, to really hold that thought that just because I'm growing, just because I'm making a change here, does not mean mic drop, empowered, et cetera, et cetera. It means that like, oh no, I'm going to get hit with something that feels like a contraction, that feels really challenging and hard because I'm doing something differently, maybe for the first time. To your point, yes, the more that we do it, the stronger that muscle gets developed and the more ease that we have around it. I can now tell people how I feel without any issues or any problems, right? But at first, that was very, very, very
Really
challenging.
scary.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to wrap up in a few minutes. But you talked beautifully about boundaries. What are boundaries? I feel like that term, it's like we hear it all the time, but I feel like it can be really confusing. What are boundaries and why are they so important? And what do people do to put boundaries in place? And I realized we could do a whole other podcast just on that.
I know.
Let's see if we can
We'll
get it done in a couple of minutes.
We'll have to come back and do like a segment all on it. Maybe I'll take the opportunity, because I think that a lot of times we talk about boundaries from the perspective of, okay, we have to learn how to set more boundaries, which is true for a lot of us. I certainly needed to learn that. But the boundaries that don't get a lot of attention are the ones that need to be lifted. And so maybe I'll just take a moment here to address those, because I think a lot of times, they just fly under the radar, and there's a problem with them because people have rigidity. And I know you've had Dr. Allie on the show too, and she speaks so beautifully about her porous and rigid boundaries and what, she'll talk about how, porous boundaries are prioritizing connection over protection, and rigid boundaries are prioritizing protection over connection, right? So the wall is totally up and really high. And so what happens is when we have people who have really rigid boundaries, right, the wall is all the way to the top. There's no opportunity for connection. There's no opportunity for intimacy. There's no opportunity for communication and, growing something. And so I think we will often invite people to set more as opposed to doing some work with other folks who need to learn how to pull some of their boundaries down in a safe way. The people who often have really high boundaries, rigid boundaries, are the ones who have probably experienced a lack of safety in their history.
So they have to be protective.
Mm-hmm. They have to be really protective. Maybe there's ruptures in trust, so deceit, lies, etc.
What would that kind of high boundary look like? I mean, what's pretty typical? Just for people who are like, I wonder if I have a high boundary. Like, what is that? What behavior is exemplified?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a lot of like avoidance. It could be kind of going dark for a while, not being highly accessible to someone, or I shouldn't even say highly, just sort of appropriately accessible, non-responsive. You don't share a lot of your life with someone who maybe has earned the right to hear that. Non-committal. If you feel like you need to protect something, like, oh, if I were to get close to you, here's the bad thing that could happen. If I were to get close to you, here's how you would start to take advantage of me. If I were to get close to you or share this with me, this is how I would get hurt, right? It's those folks who are often very hypervigilant about that really gets in the way and really blocks that. Now, the flip side of that is those who really want connection over all other things, right? And so I will please you and I will overfunction and I'll say yes even when it's a no, and I'll say no when it's a yeah, whatever. It's like everything is really mismatched here. FOMO, we're so afraid of missing out. We don't want to disappoint someone else. We just cannot tolerate that. And what happens is we lose ourselves in both scenarios, right? We lose connection to self because we are either well, I shouldn't say overly, it is appropriately protected based on the history, right?
Right.
But that again becomes the work to understand, oh, there is a function to the way that I relate to boundaries. It is
Right.
protecting me and serving something in my life. And my job is to understand what it is trying to do, what it is trying to protect, but to see the consequence that it is having in my life present day, because there are consequences.
Yeah. So do you have one little bit of advice to leave people with to determine whether they have a rigid boundary that is protecting them in ways that are, causing a problem, or the porous boundaries that are causing them to give themselves away? Because I'm in the later camp, more that porous boundary. And oh my God, it's so hard and scary, right? To be seen in a lot of ways and to say what you mean and not feel like, oh, I'm going to be in trouble, right? So what do we do if we've got one or other of these problems?
Yeah, I mean, so I think maybe a good way to identify is whether or not you feel pulled to be more connected to people than or more protected from people. And again, it's, as we were saying with the whole origin healing practice, like obviously these are not things that we just, snap our fingers and do differently. But I think it's, what I would be encouraging people, at least if I was working with them in therapy, for example, is to understand what the function is and what it is that they are actually trying to protect, right? So I don't want to lose this relationship. I can't tolerate people being disappointed in me. If I don't please people, then I'm going to lose relationships. Like, I want to understand what all of the stories are that are associated to that, because that becomes the invitation then for the work, because we're having to be able to tolerate something different than what
Yeah.
they're tolerating right now. Because that's
And
the ask is like,
by necessity, you're going to have some discomfort. Like, you just
you
have to
will
have some
always have
discomfort because you're going to be
discomfort.
breaking a pattern, and a pattern, our brains are organized, I think, to keep us safe, and that safety can be, kind of perversely not safe, but, I feel like our brains are organized to repeat patterns. Like, that's the easiest, most efficient thing for our brains to do. So then we have to override by saying, this pattern is not serving me, so I need to break it. And in breaking that, I'm going to feel discomfort. But that discomfort is not forever, right? I mean, that's the good news.
Yeah, the discomfort is not forever, and it changes over time. But you're moving from one tolerance to a different tolerance, and we're so used to and familiar with tolerating one thing, which is, I'll please you at the expense of me. I'll abandon or deny what it is that I know in order to keep a relationship, right? So we're used to tolerating one form. And so, yeah, this idea that we're going to just swing it to the other side, no, that's not going to just happen, but we're having to inch our way into a healthy space where there is middle ground, where we do consider other humans, but we are also considering ourselves. So, oh my gosh, I mean, we could just say so much more on boundaries. I feel like we just did that on
And we
speed.
will. Let's pick this discussion up. I am
Great.
so grateful, Vienna, to have had you on the show. And I'm a super fan of yours. The Your Tango team loves you. We were also excited when you said yes to being on Open Relationships. So thank you so much. Best of luck and wishes with your new baby.
Thank
And we'll look
you.
forward to having you back on Open Relationships. Thanks again.
I look forward to it as well. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, she is amazing. And just because it was so like a wow to me, I'm just going to say it again, that when you feel stuck, grieve more. And I know that's not your instinct. It's certainly not mine. It's like, back up. Let me, retreat. Let me get out of here. It is such a wonderful reminder, along with so many others, not even a reminder, but a lesson to say, like, slow down, listen, get curious about what's happening. Whoa, she's amazing. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in to Open Relationships Transforming Together. I hope you love the show as much as I loved making it with my guest, Vienna. If you haven't subscribed or followed us, please do, whether it's on YouTube, iHeart, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. We are putting our heart and souls into this show, and we hope you love it. If so, please do follow and or subscribe. We also would love your feedback and advice. You're welcome to email us at openrelationships@yourtango.com. And we also love comments in the comment section in all the places that you listen and watch. And that's it. We'll look forward to seeing you next time on Open Relationships. Thanks for tuning in.